Jed, Tom, somebody please make some sense on what the hell that was this trade deadline by the Chicago Cubs. Seriously, could somebody in this crazy world try to make sense on what happened at trade deadline? Oh, and that's not it. There's some other craziness that the Chicago Cubs and MLB baseball do. Marvelous one, Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, myself, Mike Mercado. Marvelous one, Dan Marver. Please make some sense of what the hell just happened.
They decided to keep Wilson Contreras. However, they decided to make sure nobody was left in the bullpen who pitches beyond the 6th inning except for Rowan Wick, because everybody else that had a save or a setup is gone now. And they, hopefully that pays off. I have a feeling that maybe Contreras is going to stay with the Cubs now. They made some kind of a handshake deal or whatever. So that would make the most sense. Now, Happ, I said that I didn't think he'd go because he's a 2024 free agent. So I didn't think he'd necessarily go, but no players went this time. No, from the field, except for Simmons, who went completely. Their great shortstop pickup over the winter. Andrelton, is that his name? Whatever. So he's gone. But in any event, but the big news for me is the Cubs and the Cardinals are playing in London next year in June, and that's the 2 games. Now, many of you in the radio world may not know this, but right now in this year, there are 19 games played among divisional opponents, 76 for you math majors. Next year, it's going to be 12, which is 48 for you math majors, which means that there'll be 10 games between the Cubs and the Cardinals played on the mainland USA. Okay? Now, right now, the interleague games are 20. Okay? Next year, you're going to play all 15 teams, 14 of them 3 times, 42, plus your favorite rival for 46. So that's going up 26 games to make up for the rivalry games such as Cardinals, Reds, Pirates, and Brewers, which are going down. Please make some sense of that. Now, here's what I hope happens. I hope that every team in the NL Central goes 0-45, because I want the winning team from the Central Division to be 62-100. Which is mathematically possible if you think about it.
Marvelous. I don't know.
Sorry about my rant.
No, where do we even start with all this craziness? I mean, we have this Field of Dreams game coming right down the pipeline between 2 teams who aren't competing. You have the Chicago Cubs, who for 2 straight seasons put their fans and players through baseball hell by pretending like they were going to make these moves and it's all for the future, and then they go and pretend that they're going to go buy Chelsea Football Club. Oh, and just by coincidence, the year that they want to go buy one of Europe's biggest football teams, they get 2 games in London against their division rival. I'm going to tell you something right now. Marver, we love to have fun here. We love to talk and BS. And we understand for all the important shows that we have on WCPT 820, we're the show that's supposed to bring the light, the funness, a lot of whether it's a crazy news story nationally or locally. But what is going on with the Cubs is crazy. And now this is where I want to break it down to you, right? Because we'll go to the London thing in a little bit, because I think that's all Major League Baseball and the ownership. But what's happening on that roster? What happened this trade deadline? What happened last trade deadline? And then what Jed said to the media after the deadline came and went. I don't know if the vibes are the same. I don't know if the trust is the same, but I've never seen an ownership and front office have their reputation and their goodwill deteriorate the way that this front office and ownership has. And it's not just because, they had to rip a Band-Aid. It's how they did it. It's how callous they were about it. And then it doesn't help that, in the 1990s, right, a player could get traded. You really didn't see a lot of crazy video about it. You really didn't see a lot about it. You saw the last minute quotes that he did to the beat reporters, and then he was off to his new team. Nowadays, you're seeing Chris Bryant cry in the dugout because he was drafted at a team at 18. And when he's finally married, has a house, and starting a family, and when he's about to make the most money in his life, he's traded like that without any consideration. Anthony Rizzo, how many foundations has he started here? A man of the people, gone like that. And then Wilson Contreras, say what you will. I understand the arguments, the negatives of 30-year-old catcher, a lot of miles, part of 2 different regimes before this regime came. I get it, but it's a different time in baseball. It's a 30-year-old who's still maintaining, who's a leader in your clubhouse, whether he's the leader you want, a leader nonetheless for guys like Christopher Morel and Ortega and a lot of these guys coming on. but you have a DH now. You don't, when you argue that you gave Jason Hayward so much money, you could validate this because you're paying for a guy who did it for you and who does something good for you. Now, Marvelous One, I think all this broke down the way it did because of one guy, and that's Juan Soto. And obviously, Paul, Chivari, and Devin are going to talk about the craziness that was the trade deadline. But that's what derailed the Chicago Cubs, I think. I think when a once-in-a-lifetime generation like Juan Soto came out, Wilson Contreras' bat wasn't needed. So when you saw that trade, is that the moment it hit you where like, it's going to be tough for the Cubs to get anything near what Juan Soto got for the Nationals?
As long as Contreras wasn't going to the Padres. I mean, there was still the Mets and Giants and some other teams that could have used a catcher, but that was a surprise that he didn't go at all. But here's the thing. You have to remember the Cubs aren't planning to win in 2023. They're planning to win in 2030.
Yeah. What are they, the Bears now? They're waiting for a new stadium too?
That could happen someday. Not in our lifetime, but
yeah,
that's the thing. They got some young players last year, and they got some pitchers and whatnot this year. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess the thinking is that unless they're going to get free agents, which might not be a bad idea, since they must have some money
somewhere
away.
It's got to be somewhere.
Right. But I will say this about baseball: it still is a business, and with the crying and the hugging and everything, that's nice. But the players could sign to extend. They could have. Rizzo, Baez, Bryant could have signed to extend. They would have gotten healthy money, but they chose not to. And so, I mean, they're still playing baseball, except for Bryant, who seems to be injured this year most of the time. They seem to be playing baseball. They're getting paid. They're going to have a good pension when they're done. So, I mean, we're not going to have a tag day for them. Let's put it that way. Let me just say that, So the emotion of being a Cubby, it isn't the same as it was with Ernie Banks and Billy Williams for me, I mean, the Ernie stayed with the Cubs the whole time. Williams and Santo actually played for another team, but it doesn't even seem like they did.
Yeah, it doesn't count.
But if you go back to those days, it was like more common that before free agency, which was in the 60s, really, starting with, the Kurt Flood, Catfish Hunter, and all that group. It was like a player was very often with a team until the team felt they were worn out and tried to get something at the very end of their career, Santo, Williams, Jenkins, etc. So it's a different era, and it is business, and they'll still fill the park up. That's what's say. It doesn't matter what. They'll fill the park up in the bleachers. They'll be piling together their big cup steaks, their cups, and then in the box seats. I noticed the behind home plate. They're a lot of them are empty. I mean, they're doing a tax write-off or what, so they don't even show up. Sometimes. So I don't. The place. They're not gonna. Again, I don't think they're gonna have to have a tag day for the Cubs financially. The big picture Cubs.
Yeah.
So I don't feel sorry too much for the players or the Cubs, but I don't see how they're going to win in this decade, honestly.
Marvelous, but that's it, right? Like, you're hitting all the different points that every section of sports fan is feeling with in this city, with 3 different teams and 4 teams if you want to include the White Sox. This has been my argument with Paulie Dangerous here on the Sports Cubicle with a lot of White Sox fans, and I'm going to include the Cubs into this. In Major League Baseball, it's just money. Now, it's easy for us. It's not our money. We're not billionaires. We don't like spending an extra $20 if we don't have to. But the point is Tom Ricketts, like you said, is not going to be crying poor anytime soon. He owns half of the north side of Chicago at this point. And yeah, a lot of these players, like a Javi, a Brian, a Rizzo, they made their money. They're going to be fine. They have generational wealth. But it doesn't change the fact that just because you don't have to, or that they can somewhere else, that you shouldn't. That this Cubs team shouldn't be money responsibly. Like, again, I'm not saying just willy-nilly throw it anywhere, but the fact that the White Sox weren't in on Max Scherzer, that they weren't in on Carlos Correa, that to me is a why not? Why? Because they're too expensive? It's just money in your sport. The Bears have a cap. The Bulls have a cap. Now, there's luxury taxes and whatnot, but if you're winning, it doesn't matter. You're making that back. And these TV deals in this market, and it's something I've argued with a lot of people on this team. You can say that the White Sox may be in the 3rd largest market in the country, but their attendance and the way that they're ran doesn't make it seem that way. But when San Diego, the 18th largest market in the country, is doing what they're doing, there is no excuse. The New York Mets are the 2nd team, quote unquote, in their city. They're not doing that. So it's not just about spending money. It's about spending it smartly. But Alex Correa, for example, that was a smart deal, not only for him, but for the Twins. 3 years, 100 and something million, 2-year option, puts you in a position. This is where I'm confused with the Cubs, though. What about Marcus Stroman? What about Seiya Suzuki? Where did those signings come from? Why did you do that? Where do you think your window is?
Yeah.
I'm to the belief that I don't think Jed Hoyer knows because his ownership hasn't told him.
Yeah. What is the plan? Let's look at last year's champion Atlanta Braves.
Yes.
Where were they at the trade deadline?
Uh-huh.
And they were not, they were
a bad team.
Much better than the Cubs.
Yeah. And Jock Peterson shows up. They make a couple of trades, and next thing you know, they get a bite at the apple, and they win the freaking World Series.
That's right.
Look at Washington. Washington made a few moves, got a couple of guys together, a couple of young studs. They win a championship. The Cubs did it. We've seen it with the Dodgers, the Astros. It's not that it's impossible, and you're 100% right. Like, you could tell me the baseball reasons why you move on for Chris Bryant. Bad back, bad feet. Again, on the other end of his age that we would like. But we can't ignore the fact that the Cubs, quote unquote, by the rules that they were given, did him dirty. They did do him dirty. They did a lot of their minor leaguers dirty.
Right.
That was the game they were playing.
At the beginning where they kept him in the minors in April so they'd get another year out of him.
Out of him. So, like, again, not the biggest of deals, but something that you just keep in mind of how these teams treat their star players. Because, again, in the NBA, much more of a players' league, your guy stays there typically. We knew from Jump Street Zach LaVine was going to get taken care of by the Chicago Bulls because in the NBA, if you've done what you're supposed to, they pay you. The National Football League is much more for quarterbacks. If you do your job, we will pay you. We have no choice. Baseball is not like that. Baseball runs on a weird way of losses. And how much are we at the end of the season in our books? It's a business. We understand that. It's not sport. It's not show friendship. It's show business. So 100% get it. But, Marvel, for example, Marvel Studios, all the superhero movies, right? They spend $200 million to make those movies. It's a lot of money for any company to spend, to shell out. Why? Because the return is $1 billion. So if you're the Cubs and you spend $200 million on a smart roster, a roster that competes, you're going to make it. Because if you're selling out against the Miami Marlins, what do you think you're going to be doing in October? It's just upsetting, Marvelous.
I know. The funny thing is that they got a little bit lucky when they, at the end, after the trade deadline next year, where they all of a sudden had a Wisdom, Ortega, Schwindel seemed to be okay players who had been career minor leaguers. So they got a little bit of lightning in a bottle there, but I don't think that's going to take them to the promised land.
No. Yeah.
And I don't know. I haven't really seen an interview with management explaining exactly what the plan is, which is, I won't equate it to the banking world.
Billions of dollars, still marvelous one. It's still billions of dollars.
I know a little bit about the banking world, and anybody you talk to about anything that has to do with a plan for the future, there's a lot of deflection and excuses and no solutions. And that's what I find in baseball too. So that's my take on it. And please don't fire me for that.
This is all, of course, in theory, of course. This is all just conversational.
In a theory for a lot of banks, but not the one that I've ever worked for.
Hypothetically speaking.
Right.
Now, but you bring up the ultimate point that a lot of people have turned on the Ricketts, and this is no longer the owners of the Chicago Cubs, but real estate owners, real estate moguls in the north side of of Chicago at Wrigleyville. That's what I think a lot of people have felt this has become. But that is what happened during the trade deadline. And God bless you, Wilson Contreras, for hitting that home run and getting Wrigley Field hyped up, getting a standing ovation, getting back there, and then getting a standing ovation when you won them that game. Because every time Wilson Contreras or Ian Happ, help the Cubs win a team, that's a straight middle finger to that front office and ownership. And I'm one for it. Because this isn't the National Football League. This isn't the NBA, where a first, second, third pick in the draft is going to get you a superstar that's going to start right away. Luck is not a game plan. It is not a way to run. Luck is not. And that's what a lot of this is that they're trying to sell us on.
No,
go
ahead, you're right. They're down just Hayward and Hendricks and Contreras from 2016, and Ross, of course, are the people that remain from that team. So it's basically a race. So we're in a completely new era. And, you do look at some of the other rosters of the successful teams, and there are a lot of names that you haven't really heard of. I mean, seriously, it was when they were playing the Giants recently. The Giants had a tremendous record last year, And there are a lot of names there that aren't that familiar, except for Yastrzemski's grandson. But you know what I mean.
Well, I think that's a bigger issue with Major League Baseball in general too, because we as sports fans, we know some of the young kids' names, and we know a lot of the lineage players that have had daddies in the league in the years past. Baseball has done a terrible job of promoting its young stars, because there's a lot of super good dudes beyond just Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani. Yeah, they're unicorns, but those are the only guys you hear about. Not compared to the entire thing of Major League Baseball that has super studs in their league, but you'll never hear about it because Major League Baseball has no idea how to promote its stars. And when teams like the Chicago Cubs aren't acting like the Dodgers or the Mets or the Yankees, and you're not keeping your studs for a long time, it's hard to fall in love with them. Marvelous One, before we move on, we're going to be talking about this forever because this just seems like it's never ending with the Cubs. But speaking of the Cubs, they're going to be in the forefront of a lot of national games because they are the marquee. They are one of the big brands in all of sports and entertainment. We have this Field of Dreams game against the Cincinnati Reds, which, I mean, might as well be a spring training game. And then you're going to London next year. I mean, is this overexposure? This can't be good for them, right? Or is this going to be better for the fans because people are going to see them embarrassing themselves? Not the players. The players always try hard. This is a try hard baseball team. But the ownership and front office, you think this is going to embarrass them, maybe get them into shape a little bit faster?
Yeah. Well, the thing about the Field of Dreams game is that was planned basically a year ago. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it was before or after the trade deadline, actually. So I don't know if they knew exactly. The Cubs did. I don't think they've been in sixth place before this week, but they were after the St. Louis series. So you have the two bottom feeders in the East playing each other, and Cincinnati was supposed to be on the way up at 1.2. Remember? Yeah. I mean, they were up and comer a year ago or two. So maybe that was the thinking at that point. But I guess also you're not going to probably have a coastal team going to Iowa. It looks like that's been the plan. Although, Cincinnati Cubs, I mean, White Sox, I mean, you're probably not going to have the two West Coast teams playing in Iowa. So that's probably the way it is. I mean, the Brewers, could get involved or whatever. So the Royals, I mean, they're kind of in the vicinity. So those are some other options. But I'm just saying that it appears as though that's the plan, to have teams within several hundred miles of Iowa participate in this thing. So that limits the pool right there.
Yeah, again, another financial decision. Beautiful optics. Awesome way that Fox presents that game. They did a great job last year. I mean, it was a fun game last year. I thought that was going to propel the White Sox to a deep World Series run, and couldn't get past Houston. But, for the Cubs, I just hope that the players shine. Some of the young guys are able to do some things, and I hope at the end of the day, people call out Tom Ricketts. I don't as much as I want to call out Jed Hoyer, I've never seen him do the job before. So if he's on, we're watching him right now. We're evaluating him. I've seen what Tom Ricketts has done. So it's on him now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, although I will say, in all fairness, they did bring the Yankees to Iowa last year. So I guess it doesn't have to be all Midwest. But
I'm calling it next year. I think next year the game is going to be Dodgers Padres. I think that's the game next year. They're going to bring San Diego. They're going to bring the Dodgers, and you're going to have an all-star game.
Well, here's the thing. They could just be able to build a Field of Dreams in Hollywood.
Oh, I mean, they've done it before. So marvelous one. You know what? It's been glad to this therapeutic session here on the Sports Cubicle with the marvelous one, Dan Marver, Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, myself, Mike Mercado on WCPT 820 AM has been much needed because it was a long 2 months in the summer. If you're a Cub fan, waiting for the dominoes to fall. And then when 501 came around, and then you wait, you're like, well, it takes a few minutes for these last minute deals to get through. And then 6:30 came around, 7 came around, and he's on the lineup. Ian Happ and Wilson were in the lineup. Yeah, we knew it was going to be an even longer winter. I will say this before we finish this segment. We do know that typically nowadays in baseball, you get more value for your bullpen arms this point of the year, and you get most value for your positional hitters in the offseason winter meetings. So I do think Wilson might sign that deal. We'll see what happens. There's a compensatory draft pick if he signs somewhere else. It's a lot of foolishness. But now I think there is a reality in which he might sign. But really, Ian Happ is on the clock now. Ian Happ is the one who you have to keep your eye on when it comes to December when these GMs get together. So that we will have to keep our eye on.
Yeah, Happ would be a trade possibility. Contreras, that we're past that point.
Yeah.
But as soon as I saw them really using both Gomes and Higgins at catcher, I thought This is clearly the plan.
Yeah. So it's something we'll have to keep our eyes on, especially with September right around the corner.
Yeah.
We'll see who these call-ups are. But let us know your thoughts. What did you think? The Chicago Cubs pretty much stay put, including the Chicago White Sox. Are you frustrated? Were you ecstatic? Do you think this means that these two superstars for the Cubs, these two all-stars, are coming back for a longer tenure? We want to know your thoughts. We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. The marvelous Dan Marver. It's Devin Tingle. It's Paul Chivari. I'm Mike Mercado.